So it's 8:30 in the morning on the 20th of May, and having just done a video on Chiron, the astronomy and the astrology of Chiron, I thought, after I finished that, I thought, you know what, that's only half the story. How can you talk about Chiron astrologically and astronomically if you don't also bring in the mythology of Chiron? There's a number of different stories about Chiron, but there does seem to be gradually a general consensus forming. I'm not using the Greek myths as written by Robert Graves for obvious reasons, but instead I'm using various different sources, Barbara Hand-Clough, Melanie Reinhardt, Wikipedia, etc., etc. And I seem to have got a fairly good idea of the mythology of Chiron, and it relates to the astronomy and astrology. Now we know that Chiron's father was, in most stories, it was Saturn, Kronos, and in a few other stories it was Zeus, Jupiter. But Chiron's father was after Chiron's mother, and he turned himself into a horse because Chiron's mother turned herself into a mare. Her name was Philaria. And Chiron was conceived by two beings in horse form. Thus Chiron was born half man, half horse, the centaur. He's unlike all the other centaurs or the satyrs of Greek mythology. They're much more coarse and gross and violent. The satyrs in general were born of Ixion and Nephele, whereas Chiron was not. Chiron is or was immortal, born of the king of the gods. But he was so ugly that his mother abandoned him and pushed him into a coracle, as in Talisian, as in Moses, and pushed him off down the river. And that's the last she ever saw of him. So he didn't know his dad, and his mother abandoned him at birth. Good start. He was picked out of the water by the handmaidens of Apollo, and Apollo taught him. And Apollo taught him how to be human. He taught him archery, he taught him warfare, he taught him medicine and wisdom and education. What he didn't do was teach him about how to be an animal. But Chiron in time became a big teacher. And he taught a lot of people. He taught Ajax. He taught Asclepius, taught him the basics of modern medicine. He taught Heracles, Jason of the Argonauts. He certainly taught Achilles. And even Dionysus was taught by Chiron. Chiron did actually marry, and he married the nymph Chariko, and she gave birth to 3 children by Chiron, maybe 4. Certainly there were at least 2 daughters, if not 3, and 1 son, of which little is known, apart from one of the daughters, oh God, I don't know how to pronounce this, Okiro. And she was born with the gift of foresight, and she foresaw that Chiron would surrender his immortality, rather than die a painful permanent death. And because she was gifted with this sight, he silenced her, and he made her mute. He's not very nice energy, Chiron, in mythology. Of course, he taught all the healers, and he taught all the warriors, and he gave them the benefit of all his skills. And particularly Achilles, he gave a set of arrows. And there was a fight between Achilles and a bunch of other centaurs, and Chiron tried to intervene, but one of the arrows lodged itself in his heel. He became mortally wounded with his own fatal poison, but he was invulnerable because he's the child of the king of the gods, so he can't die. What does he do? So he travels all the way around the world. He visits every culture trying to find a way to heal himself, and he can never find it. He can never find the only cure for his illness. And the illness is as much allegorical and symbolic as it is physical. But on these travels, he picks up so many different techniques, skills, hints, methods of healing that he becomes the archetypal healer of all time. Mortally wounded, but the best healer. Comes back to Greece, teaches a few more people. Everyone feels sorry for him because he's dying and in permanent pain, but he can't die, and at the same time he's a brilliant healer. At the end of the day, one of his nephews, maybe, Prometheus, who was a little bit of a troublemaker, stole the fire of the gods, which may have been consciousness, it may have been free thought and language, it may have been astrology, and gave it to humanity, for which he was chained to a rock in Tartarus by Zeus, with every day a griffin or an eagle coming down and pecking out his liver. Chiron, being mortally wounded and in permanent pain, like Prometheus, he said, look, let's swap. You can have your freedom and I'll go to the rock. Chiron's actually quite different to every other Greek god, in that he's half human, or half dryad to be honest, and half god. But he forsakes his immortality so that he can die like a human. The lesson of Chiron here mythologically is what's carried through into astrology. Mortally wounded, never going to get better, never being able to heal himself, but able to heal others. And only through healing others does he end up finally healing himself, when he gave up his mortality because he realized he couldn't physically heal himself. When he gave up his mortality, chained himself to the rock, Zeus took pity on him and cast him into the stars, into the constellation of Sagittarius. And that's where he was first seen in 1895, but no one knew what he was. And now, of course, Chiron's a permanent part of our astrological pantheon. And about blooming time. Catch you later.